Hello, my name is Omar,
I'm Nick Dow.
and welcome to Smarter Sundays, where we have a new topic every week. We have a special guest here, Joe. Joe graduated from Wentworth class of 2021 with a degree in business management with a concentration in entrepreneurship. Joe works at Wentworth Innovation and Entrepreneurship Center as the program coordinator. Why don't you say hi?
Hey everyone, Omar, Nick, thanks for having me on the show today.
It's great to have you. Joe has done a lot of stuff here at Wentworth, and we're going to go and focus on his expertise, which is presentations, startups, and his personal experience with the startups. So we're just going to start with the presentations. So, in your opinion, Joe, what makes a good presentation?
I think it's a really good question, Omar, and there's a lot of types of presentations you can give. So you can give presentations in class, you can give a pitch where you're asking for something like money, time, or even a loan from a bank. Really, so we present a lot of ideas all the time throughout our lives. And I think really the most powerful presentations are stories, right? So you're telling someone a story. If you're making a pitch, it's the problem you saw and how you engaged with that problem and how you slowly developed a solution. And then of course kind of walking whoever is listening through that kind of journey you went on. And that's really engaging, and people love listening with that. And I think the other big thing that makes a good presentation is a strong opening. I like to remind people you have about like 10 seconds to capture your audience's attention. Otherwise, that's it. They're done paying attention to you. So if you can open strong and grab that attention and then hold it, you'll make for a very memorable presentation.
All right, that is good. Thank you. When you are presenting, how important is posture?
Another good question. Posture and presentation. I personally find posture to be huge, right? Posture sends these subconscious signals to your audience about how engaged you are in the topic, how excited you are. If you're up there on stage and you're kind of hunched over, looking away from the audience and kind of just seemingly distracted, and your tone of voice will typically match whatever your posture is. So I always tell people, remember to just engage, be an engaging posture, and you'll find that your tone of voice and the way you speak will be more engaging.
All right. Does that include hand movements?
I think hand movements can be beneficial to a presentation. So, if you're saying, "Oh, up on the slide here," and you can point to the slide behind you, it can add to it. But I certainly think if you do too much hand gestures, it can be distracting. It's almost in a comedic sense where you see these comedians and they're doing a lot of hand gestures and stuff, and it gets the audience to laugh. But if you're trying to give a serious presentation, your hands are flying all over the place. Maybe not the tactic you want to use.
Yeah, getting on Joe's point of having a lot of hand movement, especially like when you're giving a presentation in architecture, if you're moving like your hands around and everything like that, you're really actually, in a sense, covering what you're trying to show. So it's like when you have judges that you can't really get your point across as well as you could.
Alrighty. Now, of course, you graduating from Wentworth, you know that we love to do a lot of presentations here.
Yes, we do.
Many of them. Do you think someone who is doing presentations will benefit from a history of public speaking and a way to make it have a good presentation strategy?
Yeah, so I guess the real question here is does presenting more in public and doing more presentations make you a more confident public speaker? And I think the simple answer is yes. The more you do anything, right, the more you learn how to do it, the more you evolve your own kind of way of doing it, and you feel comfortable, it makes it easier and easier to get up and give those presentations. I myself have found that after the global pandemic, which is still continuing, I didn't do a lot of public speaking the last 2 years. Now, I used to be excellent at public speaking, personally. Like, I thought I was very good at public speaking before the pandemic, and I've noticed now that I'm getting up in front of crowds again, it's difficult. It's harder than it used to be. And I think that's really because I haven't exercised my presentation muscle in like 2 years.
Yeah, I haven't done a presentation in years.
Even coming back, although during the pandemic, being in school and giving a presentation basically every single project, because that's just how architecture is. Mm-hmm. Coming back in person to give presentations in front of actual people versus what we quote unquote called Zoom University. It was hard. it was definitely nerve-wracking.
Well, that's also because Zoom University doesn't actually really develop the good presentation skills, because a lot of it is just not applicable when you present over Zoom.
Yeah, because I feel like when you really actually need like movement and like the actual like words to show, like you can't really do that. You basically have to use a drawing tool to like use as hand movements.
Yeah.
Right. And I think Zoom, too, doesn't allow people to push themselves beyond their comfort zones. I think it's too easy to get a presentation on your laptop and then have a script you'll read off of, for example. Whereas in your architecture class, you don't have a script in front of you, right? You're up there in front of these critics and you're presenting something, and now you don't have anything to rely on.
Yeah, basically your script is on your boards.
Exactly, and you can't be staring at your board throughout the presentation, so it really is pushing people past their comfort zone when they're doing this in person. I think Zoom was, it made it easier, and that's great if people have a really serious presentation anxiety, but if you don't have a chance to push yourself beyond that presentation comfort zone, you won't build the skills that you're looking to build through that history of public speaking that your question referred to, Omar.
Yeah, going off of Joe's point of basically you can't be reading off your boards, it's basically like what we've all been told when we give a presentation. Don't be staring at your paper or your board the whole time, because it's like you're talking to the wall, not to actual people.
Yeah, because, I have seen many presentations where they just stare at the screen, talk exactly word for word off the screen, and just move next. And that's not engaging at all. And obviously, during the time I went with, you had to present to judges, critiques, etc. When you present yourself to judges, what do you think is the proper way to introduce yourself, and why?
What a great question. So as I said, the start of your presentation is huge. And if you don't start off strong and don't grab someone's attention, it doesn't matter if they're a judge, an investor, a professor, or maybe just an audience of a speech you're giving, right? It's going to make keeping that audience paying attention to you very difficult. So I learned this from Michael Mozil, professor here that teaches business. And his number one rule for openings is never start with, "Hi, my name is." I mean, I don't care if everyone else before you has started with, "Hi, my name's Joe, and today I'm going to talk about," the 13th person that says that, the opening doesn't mean anything to the audience that's listening anymore. So opening was something much stronger. I know this is live on air, so it's a risk, but Omar, give me a topic. Any topic.
Architecture.
Did you know that 4 out of 5 architects that try and get their master's degree never are able to achieve it? And they are unable to open their own firms that they've wanted to their entire lives. Right? So I just made that up on spot. But that opening is probably much different than, "Hi, my name's Joe, and today I want to tell you about how hard it is to have an architect actually succeed at what they want to do." It's all right, but I kind of liked the first one better. It's like, wow, 4 out of 5. You're starting with something powerful.
I will tell you this, Joe, especially being an architect major and having to do these presentations. Due to a professor my freshman year that actually said, "Don't start with it," literally, all my professors tell me you had a stronger opening compared to most of your classmates.
Because you got great advice your first year, which is don't open that. By the way, I just made that up on spot, so let's just be clear about that. That was all made up.
That is a really good intro, because it does, what's the word in English when it's a logical argument?
Are you talking about like pathos, ethos?
Yeah.
Like the logic, emotion, and...
Because not only does that have a logical element, like 4 out of 5 people,
Right.
you also build a strong emotional connection with the audience, saying that 4 out of 5 architects do not achieve their dream when they build in a firm.
Right.
And people can relate to that, because everyone has dreams that they want to do. And it would be so they can understand what it's like to fail at those dreams. So they are instantly much more engaged than it was.
You're right. Imagine your audience being a room full of undergrad architecture students, and your opening is 4 out of 5 of you aren't going to get your master's. And every single person in the room is expecting that they're going to get their master's. Again, the statistic is just made up. We're just using it as a play example, but that would grab your audience's attention. Just like, geez, wait a minute. You mean the 5 of us sitting in this row, only one of us is going to get it, but we all want it? So which one of us is the one? So you engage them, and then they're going to probably pay them a little bit more attention to you.
So this is actually going off the original question they asked.
Mm-hmm.
Do you change what you say as an introduction based on who's in the audience?
Definitely. I
Yeah.
think based on the impact that you want to get, you alter your opening. So if you want a strong reaction, grab someone's attention, and maybe you'll use the right, 3,000 penguins die every day because of global warming, right? Because you have something you want to say about global warming. Maybe if this is a speech to inspire people, I might start off with a quote. John F. Kennedy once said that, insert quote here, right? Still strong opening, grab people's attention, but you're delivering a different emotional response.
Yeah, even like with architecture too, I feel like it's the stronger you are with your opening, the more likely your audience is to pay attention to what you're trying to sell or like propose.
Or convince them of. It depends on the presentation. So, you have done many presentations, I'm assuming, from when you were a freshman here to when you graduated, and bet you even now you do presentations.
Yes.
If you were to go back in time to your freshman year, alright, is there any tips you'll give your past self on how to prepare a presentation and how to be a good presenter?
That is a fantastic question. And I'm interested to hear Nick's response as well from the presentations he gives in architecture. The first thing I'd tell myself is breathe. Look, it's an experience, and adrenaline and anxiety are to your body the same exact thing as excitement, right? It's just stress. Your body can't tell the difference. So the first thing is breathe. And that, every time you do it, you can expand your comfort zone. And whenever you expand your comfort zone, you expand your capability zone. And that's the big thing that you would want to push. So, starting off small, if you've never done a lot of public speaking before, your freshman year can go light years for when you go and give your capstone presentation senior year, right? It can start expanding your capability zone sooner, as opposed to just getting up there senior year and going, wow, there is 150 people in front of me, and this is the first time in my college career I've ever spoken in front of a large crowd. And I have to do this to pass my class and graduate. So good luck. So start preparing earlier is what I'd make sure I would be doing.
And now, Nick, I would like to hear your answer.
I'd say definitely from when I was a freshman here, it was definitely like, as Joe said, nerve-wracking, and basically like you're like, okay, there's so many people in front of me right now, like what do I do? Like I'm completely nervous, like if I don't do well, like I'm gonna fail, all that kind of stuff, like what every freshman really has. I'd say giving my past self is similar to what actually Joe had an event recently this past week with a speaker coming basically about giving good presentations. And I'd say basically with architecture, the most important stuff is definitely make sure you tell a story and actually like make sure you have like sort of bringing them on a journey, because if you keep like going back and forth between ideas and mixing it up, you're not really getting those needed aspects to be good at presenting.
Yeah, that is a very, very good thing. I do have a follow-up question based on this one. If you had to go and look at all 4 years of your time at Wentworth, which presentation that you gave that you can think of was the most stressful or nerve-wracking for you?
That's easy. So my junior year of college, right, the fall of 2019, I was invited to go speak at President Thompson's inauguration when he became the new president of Wentworth Institute of Technology. I got a personal invite from him, so I knew I couldn't say no. And
Must have been stressful.
It was. So I was honored that he asked me to be the student representative. But at first, I didn't realize how many people were going to be in the room. So I was thinking, it's an inauguration ceremony, so maybe we're talking like 50 to 100 at most. It turns out it was actually going to be a full Watson Auditorium, which can probably fit 300 people easy. If not more, plus live stream. So we're talking maybe like a 500 person audience, let's call it. The mayor's there, everybody's there. So then I started going, oh man. So I was stressed for that. Not only was it a big crowd, but also just, it was a big deal. Like the event was big and it was President Thompson's day. So the last thing I want to do is not do well and reflect badly on a big day for him. So I think that was the most stressful, hands down. But it went well, so it worked out.
But what did you do before that presentation so that you can prepare for it?
That is an excellent question. So let me give you a couple tips of what I did. The first thing was I wrote the speech out completely. and I memorized it. I knew it front to back, back to front. I could say it and without, stopping, without having to look at the paper. And personally, for me, I needed that. The script was going to be in front of me on the podium, so worst case scenario, you could default to glancing down and reading off of it, but I just felt like I wanted to know it. The second thing I did was going to Watson Auditorium the day before, standing up in front of an empty room with some physical plant workers just working on the seating arrangements and giving the presentation. Being in the space that you're going to give a huge presentation in and practicing it is excellent.
Yeah, I do the same with friends or whatever the day before actual presentations, especially like actual finals, depending on what time of year it is, December, April, or August. And it definitely helps.
Right, being in the space you're going to give the presentation in can get your mind in a place. It does two things. One, gets you to anticipate what your surroundings are going to be, which can help, two, your anxiety, right? So now your anxiety can say, I've been here and I've given this already and it went fine. So now that I'm here, sure, there's more people in the room, but I've already done it. So you almost get the sense of, right, anxiety's panic for the future. But now if you have a past experience, which is extraordinarily similar, you giving the presentation in that space, just minus the audience, it can help. Last thing I did, deep breathing and a power pose, which we might talk about a little bit later, before the event, right? Getting yourself in a mental state, ready an hour before you go on, that it helps. People think deep breathing is, fake. It's real. It can calm yourself down, and that's what I did, and that's what helped me a lot.
Awesome. Thank you for clarifying that for me and clearing those tips.
So, Joe.
Yes, Nick.
What do you find the ideal outfit to be when giving a presentation, and what do you consider to be unacceptable, if there is any?
The best outfit? I think it depends on the occasion, right? Sometimes dressing a certain way is actually part of the presentation. So let's say you're giving a pitch and you want to make a point, right? You might actually come dressed in a certain way that helps deliver your point. I think generally when it comes to, picking out your outfit, if you don't have a specific purpose behind your outfit, I would fit what your audience is, right? It will help make them more comfortable, right? If you go to give a, presentation to a class of college students and it's just, a quick report out and everything, and you come in a full tux, that's going to be a little weird, standing in your classroom in Wentworth Hall and everyone else is in jeans and a t-shirt. It just doesn't fit. But if everyone's in business casual, probably be in business casual, if not a little bit more, right? It always depends on the event, but like I said, I always just default to kind of what the audience is going to be in, and that usually hasn't led me astray.
Okay, that's good. But what if you don't know what the audience could be in beforehand? What is your default if you don't know?
Yeah, what if you're told, we just want you to present this, and you're given no other information?
That's a great question. So 9 times out of 10, right, you'll have the information. It's a wedding, it's a class presentation, it's a pitch, it's a, dinner, it's a gala, whatever it is. You'll probably know the event you're going to. If all else fails and you have no idea what event you're going to, my personal default is business casual. I'll do jeans and I'll do like nice comfortable shoes, not sneakers with like the Nike logo on them, but like, fairly comfortable shoes, but not super dressy. So like Sperry's and stuff like that? Maybe something like that. And then I'll do a tucked in, button down collared shirt. I might throw on a blazer or a jacket that matches. And I'll go with that. So worst case scenario, I am in business casual. And then if the audience is super casual, I can just ditch the jacket, roll up the sleeves, go in like that, and I'm in jeans and a tucked in collared shirt with a nice belt and some decent shoes. If I showed up at a wedding, maybe it would be a little weird, but still, like, you're not super casual, but you're not super dressy, so you can pretty much fit into everything.
Alrighty. So as you know, I work at SOA as a front desk, and I get to sit there during some of Moselle's classes. I love his classes. he really does capture my attention. And I do see a lot of the students presenting during his classes. And so I do notice, though, that eye contact could be a bit iffy sometimes. I notice some of them do it a lot, some of them do it quite a lot. So how important do you think eye contact is when you're presenting a project or a proposal?
Eye contact is huge. Eye contact is an indicator to people that are listening, right? Your audience, how interested you are and how engaged you are. I mean, like it or not, it's whatever you do, and this goes back to your kind of posture / body language question. Everything you give off is interpreted by people in a certain way. You might not know how they're going to interpret it, but it's everything you do, and eye contact is big, right? Our society believes when you make eye contact with someone, you're engaged, right? You're speaking to them, which makes them feel good. I know it can be tough sometimes, just staring at people. So there's a few tactics you can use to get that engagement without staring people down in the audience and feeling like you're intimidating people. The first thing is face your audience, right? A lot of people have a slide deck behind them. So they have the PowerPoint presentation, and they turn and they are staring at it, reading off of it, and clicking. Okay, you're not making any eye contact. You're reading off the PowerPoint, which offends me in the audience because I can read the PowerPoint too. And if you're reading it, why do I need you here? Because I can read it too. So facing your audience. So now you're facing the audience and you're staring at a crowd of, let's say, 25 people. It's a class presentation. Scanning around the room as you're talking is big. So not staring at one person for 10 seconds, just making eye contact with them while you're speaking. That gets kind of intimidating. So just kind of glancing around the room, slowly moving your head back and forth, look this way for a couple seconds, turn and look to the right for for a couple seconds, look to the center for a few seconds. That's the tactic I use, and it seems to engage the audience well. If you really, really, really hate making eye contact with people, I recommend looking at people's foreheads, right? They're gonna think you're making eye contact with them, but you're actually looking at their forehead, which for some reason changes the game with people who don't like looking at people and making direct eye contact. Just look at their forehead and just scan around the room looking at people's foreheads. It works. I promise you.
You promise? So, side note off of that,
I actually had one too.
I went to the presentation that went with new prosperous professors were doing, giving presentations for potential professors for Wentworth.
Mm-hmm.
And I went to quite a few of them because, they're good to take a look at that. One of them I went to, the professor gave so much eye contact to me and made me really uncomfortable. And I really didn't like it. It was way too much.
Yeah,
it's an example of over eye contact.
Yeah. So for this other question. So in architecture, we get given a tip: practice what you're gonna say hours or the day, basically any time before the actual presentation. How beneficial do you think this is?
Practicing what you're going to present before you present it?
Like actually saying it in front of somebody, or literally writing stuff down?
Oh yeah, I mean, some people practice in front of a mirror. If you can practice in front of someone, it's even better than practicing by yourself. For two reasons. One, it makes you feel more comfortable having someone actually listen to you. And two, they can give you feedback. If you're open to it. I mean, a lot of people aren't open to feedback. I think being open to feedback before you give like a big speech, for example, is huge. You want people to hear it. And the other thing you can try is, if you really don't want to try it in front of someone first, right? You want to know how it sounds before, record yourself and listen to it. I find that really weird, but it also gives me a big chance to self-edit what my speech is. Do that once and then go and try and give it in front of people.
So when you record yourself, you said you find it weird. Is that because the way you hear yourself is different from the way you heard by others?
I think it's just funny sometimes. You think you're saying things one way, and then you can actually listen to it, and you go, "Wow, that's not how I am trying to say that." But it gives you an excellent chance to rephrase, rewrite, and edit.
Yeah, I do that too, where I try to say something, but then it doesn't actually turn out correctly. So going off of that, how important is clarity when it comes to presentations?
And keeping it like on the same sort of topic as eye contact and posture, which do you find most important?
Okay, I'll do Omar's question first, and then we'll get back. That's an interesting one. Having clarity and being clear, you can do that in two ways. One, with the words you're saying and how you're saying it. So what I mean by with the words you're saying is right. If you are speaking to a second grade class, right, you're not going to write out your presentation and present in the same way you would for seniors in college. You're not going to use the same vocabulary, right? It's being clear. You've got to make sure they understand you. So having clarity in the words you use. The second is how you speak, right? If you speak super fast or you kind of mumble a little bit and make it hard for people to hear, I always tell people, honestly, if you're not being clear and people are struggling to understand you, there's no point in presenting. The whole point of a presentation is to convey information to people. And for whatever reason, if that's not working out, you've got to change something, because otherwise there's no point in presenting. People are going to walk away feeling like their time was wasted. You're going to feel like your time was wasted, and you want a positive experience with your presentation.
Totally agreeable, because like even in architecture, they always tell us, think of it this way. Think of when you're writing what you're going to say down. Think of it as in the sense you're presenting this to somebody who's never heard this before, somebody that's never seen this. So literally, basically, if you're using very well descriptive words that may not actually not get your point across, you really have to sort of not necessarily dumb it down, but like make it as simple as can be that for your audience can actually understand you.
Right, exactly. And I think that's excellent advice that they're giving you.
One thing that I do before I do presentations or any type of speaking is to tell myself to slow down, because I am a naturally fast talker, and when I do talk fast, it just kind of mumbles together and people have a hard time understanding me. I don't normally notice this though, because a lot of people that I hang out with just get used to the way I speak and are able to understand it more than someone who never met me, which is an issue.
Yeah. And if keeping on the topic of clarity, this kind of jumps into the question that we have next, but for architecture and probably all design majors, another piece of clarity that's really important is making sure your boards actually also get your point across, because sometimes it comes down to the situation where you're not there to present these ideas, and if you aren't there, you have to make sure like your point is actually like really clear and well organized through your boards or slides.
We never did answer your question that you posed to him though.
Did you want to repeat that for me quick? It was
Oh, yes.
Give me that.
So, keeping on the topic of clarity and also keeping in mind posture and eye contact, what do you find most important?
Ooh. I mean, I'm going to preface this answer with it's all important. If you don't have good eye contact, you don't have engaging posture, and you're not clear with your audience, you're not going to give as good of a presentation as you could have. Given that, now that I've kind of thrown that out there, I think the number one that I put is the clarity question, right? Sure, you don't have great eye contact. Sure, your posture is not great, but if you can be clear and get the information across, I can still say, yeah, I'll give you a C. Like you did it, you passed, you conveyed the information, but it wasn't the best way of conveying it, but I got the information. So your presentation did succeed. So I would have to put that as number one, but again, all three of them, if you want to give a killer presentation, are critical.
Thank you.
Alrighty. So now I think Nick was trying to hint at with his spiel about organized boards is how important is it to have a well-organized board / slideshow for a presentation?
I don't think it's important at all. I know that's a super controversial opinion, but...
So do you think it's basically more important to be able to define and get your point across and not have a well-organized board?
I don't think you need one at all, is what I'm saying. I don't think people need a PowerPoint presentation. I don't think people need a board or a poster behind them. I think you can deliver If you are good at public speaking and you practice and you develop your public speaking skills, you can give an excellent, engaging, informational presentation with nothing supporting you, right? Some of the best TED Talks you'll ever watch, these people have just pictures as their support slides. Or one singular word. There is no information on those slides. It doesn't matter where that word pops up in the square of the PowerPoint. It doesn't really do anything on its own, right? You flip through that PowerPoint, you're not going to get any information. It's the person delivering it. And frankly, again, that goes back to it. I'm there for the person delivering the information. I'm not there to read a PowerPoint slide. But on the same token, to Nick's point, if you're setting up a display, right? Almost think of like a museum or an architecture presentation or an industrial design final critique, right? If you're setting that up, you will want to organize that well and display it in a way that, one, people want to go and read it, and number two, people can get the information they need from it and walk away thinking, hey, I learned something cool. Why do you want to do that? Because you might not be there all the time, right? It's a museum exhibit, not someone standing there not telling you, hey, so this is what it is. Right, you need to convey that information well in like an aesthetic and organized way. Otherwise, people are going to walk into the Museum of Science and they're going to walk out going, I don't know what that was all about. So it depends, right? I think you can give a very strong presentation with nothing to support you, but there are some situations where the support is what matters, and having it organized is critical.
Thank you. If someone came to you struggling how to prepare themselves for a presentation they had in the upcoming week, what advice would you give them to lower stress and make them feel ready? Why, Joe?
The number one question, right? How do I prepare for a presentation? And I remember sitting there in my junior year, looking this up, trying to figure out, how can I breathe? It's great when the presentation's 2 weeks away and you wake up that morning and go, I've got 2 weeks. But in the back of your head, you're one day going to wake up and go, oh, I have that this morning. So what I'd recommend is kind of something we've talked about before, is first, when you're making your presentation, right, and you want to make it engaging, remembering some of the things we've talked about, right? You need a strong opening, right? You want to tell a story. And the last one I'd add to it is, when you really sit down to build this presentation or this speech or whatever it is, start at the end. And that was another excellent tip I received in my education here at Wentworth. Start at the end. Why do you start at the end? Because you want to know where you want to leave your audience. Where do I want them to walk away? And how do I want them to feel? What do I want them to walk away with? I think that's huge. And when you start at the end and then build the presentation to get to that end point, it sounds so much better. The story's so much clearer, and your audience will feel engaged through it. A lot of people also say, tell the audience what you're going to tell them. Tell the audience, and then tell the audience what you told them. It's a similar format, right? You're starting at the end. This is what I'm going to tell you, or this is what I told you, and then you build it. And then little things, right? Like practice in front of a mirror, record yourself, practice in front of people, practice in the space where you did it. Breathing the day of, right? Power pose. Right? It's proven in psychology, right? These aren't just things we make up. The power pose, I'll give you an example. Standing there and kind of spreading your legs apart a little bit and putting your hands on your hips so your elbows are bent, and then just puffing out your chest and like breathing in and out, right? Some people call it like a Superman pose. Pretend that cape is like flapping in the wind behind you, even though the Incredibles would say no capes, and just feeling that power. And the idea of it is actually taking up space. It turns out the more space you feel like you're taking up, the more powerful you think you are. And if you do that, your brain is actually going to calm down, because it's going to build confidence inside of you. Sounds crazy, but it works, right? Day of, do those little tips and tricks to help you now that you've prepared and practiced and you're ready to deliver it.
So actually, off of the power pose, I
have another one
too. Power pose is just a placebo.
You know what? It might be, but it is proven to actually make people more confident and relaxed when they present. Maybe it doesn't dump a bunch of adrenaline into your brain. Maybe it has no chemical adjustment in your bloodstream. But when people do it and you have it for 2 minutes, they say, if you do it for 2 minutes and then you get up there, you'll see a difference. I've done it. It works for me. It works for everyone I know who've tried it. It's crazy.
So, a quick follow-up.
Mm-hmm.
If someone So how would your advice differ from somebody that came to you that was in business management versus somebody that was in, I don't know, say like applied math or architecture?
I think it goes back to whatever your presentation is, right? If this is your capstone presentation, regardless of what major you're in, it's the same deal. Here's the work I've done. This is how I did it, and this is the result we got. Your story's almost always the same. If someone came to me regardless of their major and said, I'm pitching to investors, great. What's your problem? What's your solution? What's the impact it has? And why are you the people that are actually going to deliver this solution? And why should I give you money? How much do you want? What are the terms? So you have this blueprint of presentations you go through, but it doesn't really matter what your background is. It matters what you're trying to achieve, right? What the end goal is. Again, regardless of major. Oh, I've got a big speech to give and I've got to wow an audience. Awesome. What story are you going to tell? But it's an interesting question. And I think when you break it down like that, and it's just a blueprint, right? I think it can work for everyone.
That is true. That is true. Do you have anything else you would like to say?
Well, that's it for me.
And that's it for me. So we're going to take a quick break here, and when we come back, we're going to be talking about startups and your experience with them later.
Ooh, can't wait.
All right, and welcome back. That was a great break. Some pretty good music. Joe actually picked it out himself. And we're going to get right into talking about startups. Joe has a lot of experiences with startups, as he has done a few of his own. We will get to those later in the show. But since he has experience, let's ask him some questions.
So, Joe, what's a startup to you?
What is a startup to me? I think there's a lot of definitions about startups that have kind of popped up in the last 10 years. Everyone has their own take on it. So I guess I'll add my own. To me, a startup company, right, is a company that's in the early stages of operation. Something that has funding and backing, as I described in the jungle stage, I would say, right? So still kind of like chopping away and kind of finding their path forward, but they have a backing, right? They have something that they're going on. So just someone with like an idea and $100 in the pocket, I wouldn't necessarily call a startup. I would definitely say it has to be a formed company, probably a legal entity of the government, right? An LLC or something like that. That's trying to start up their operations. Doesn't need to be have revenue yet, but again has that financial backing to actually go out and kind of build what they're talking about.
So, is there, because actually go off the topic, Netflix when they first opened were not making revenue for many years. Would you consider them a startup? And would you consider, if they aren't a startup, what would you consider a startup versus not a startup?
A great question. So a lot of companies, right, are cash flow negative, what they call it, aka they're spending more money than they're making for a long time, and trying to develop their operations and their business moving forward. I think that Netflix, during the time it wasn't making money, I would consider a startup, right? If you're not actually making enough money to cover your expenses and you're still relying on the funding of investors, backers, people like that, then you're still in that startup phase, right? Because you're not running on your own yet. You're still relying on outside support to keep your doors open.
Is there anything that could not be considered a startup?
It's a great question.
Like, is there any sort of businesses that focus on any specific topics that couldn't be considered a startup?
I don't think it has to do with topic. I think it more has to do with what stage you're in. So if you open the doors of your restaurant, right, and you have customer base and you're cash flow positive out of the gate, I wouldn't necessarily consider that a startup. I would call it like a first venture, like absolutely. And it's successful right out of the gate. You've got your restaurant or your little food truck and you're cash flow positive right away. You pay off a couple debts and then you're self-sustaining. I wouldn't necessarily say that was a startup. Now, other people might disagree, right? My definitions here aren't end all be all, but I think if someone came forward and they were had a proposed solution for a problem and they started building your team, started getting funding from investors, started building some prototypes, started moving forward, and they had like a development path they needed to go down. I'd say that's a startup. And it took them a while to get their revenue coming in and everything, and then finally it's changed over to actually being cash flow positive.
Alrighty. So obviously when you have certain ideas, some of them require people to help you develop those ideas, do research, get products, making the ideas and whatnot, and might just based on the company. But as a startup, when you want to create a startup, how many workers do you find you would need to start your startup?
That's a really interesting question. I think it really depends on the goal of the company, right? The problem you're trying to solve and the scope of the business, right? We'll use our example of the food truck, right? Versus Google or Netflix or someone like that, right? When you're opening your food truck business, let's say you've got 2 trucks and you've got, going around the city and everything. And I think really it's, how many workers do you need? I'm making up an example here on spot. Let's call it 6 between the 3 food trucks, right? You got, a driver plus chef, and then the driver turns cashier plus person handing it out when the truck is parked. So you need 3 workers. But now if you're looking to start Netflix, you're gonna need a lot more than 3 workers probably, or 6 workers to try and get that going. So I think it depends on, like I said, the scope of your business. The food truck obviously is a much smaller scope. Netflix is a much bigger scope. And of course, the skills required, right? If you have something you're trying to do, like build a crazy engineering system, right? You probably will need an industrial designer, 2 mechanical engineers, an electrical engineer, electromechanical engineer, right? You're gonna need a big set of skills. So you need a lot of people because no one's gonna have all those.
Okay, alright. And you see a lot of startups come and go over many years. Like I see so many in Boston alone, and I notice that a lot of them do like to focus on similar topics. So are there any popular topics that startups focus on?
Or any you see very common?
Yeah, so the first thing to realize is startups can be in any industry, whether it's food, clean tech, health, whatever it is. You can have a startup in any industry. However, the ones that have gotten attention, I would say in the last decade or so, maybe even 20 years at this point, are tech companies. I mean, you see them in the news all the time. It's Facebook, it's Google, it's Netflix, it's YouTube, it's Twitter, it's TikTok, it's just tech company after tech company that are in the news. Now, a lot of people have different theories on why they're in the news so much. A lot of these theories break down to it's tech, so it's not that capital intensive, right? It's software. It's once you build it, you ship it out, and that's it. There's no more construction of it. It's not super capital intensive, and there's a lot of buzz with investors dumping huge sums of money into these tech companies, right? Silicon Valley is all tech companies, right? You don't see, food innovation technologies coming out of Silicon Valley. It's tech. So I think really in the past 20 years, tech has been the huge tech industry startup.
I'd say with the state the world's in currently, would you consider climate change and green energy to be considered popular these days?
There are a lot of green energy and sustainability startups, absolutely, and I think we really need them because our climate is struggling. And typically they pop up. You'll find a lot of them on the East Coast and the West Coast as well. Those are some of the major places for startups to pop up. I think San Francisco, Chicago, and Boston are the top 3 innovation cities in the U.S., if not the entire world, for startups anyway. For startup communities.
Yeah, I feel like there's a new tech startup every other day, though.
Oh yeah.
With how fast tech is progressing. So, if people want to say, I want to do a startup, and they really, really want it, but they don't know where to start, are there any famous startups that people should look into, take inspiration from? And if so, which ones are those?
Yeah, I think inspiration comes from anywhere. So depending on who you are and who you follow and kind of what things get you inspired, whether that be intellectually or emotionally, I think it's really up to the person. But I think for me, Airbnb is a super company for me. I think they had
had that down too.
Yeah, they have a really good story, And I think they told it very well. And I think they approached their problem they want to solve in a very unique way. And they were able to convey that approach in a way that made people feel like they were kind of building something together. And then there's a bunch of ones in Boston. I think, just looking it up, if you're looking for inspiration and you're local to the Boston area, just taking a scroll through, going to some networking events with startups and stuff, if you're really looking to get into it, and just talk to these people and get inspired. The networking events people host in Boston, you are going to meet the CEOs and founders of these startups, which is the super cool part. And then you can just go and ask them questions. And I haven't met someone who's in a startup who doesn't care about asking my questions. They're all super nice, super engaging, and even when I was a first year in college, they had no problem answering the stupidest questions I had.
You want to continue?
Sure. So Joe, having experience in startups, if you were the founder of a startup, what would you look for in workers during the hiring process?
What an excellent question. And now I've hired actually a couple people over my very short career, and even in college I helped hire some people. And startups are slightly different, but not that different from any other hiring process. So the first thing I look for is motivation, right? How engaged you are, how, driven you are, right? Non-technical skills, maybe this is an unpopular opinion here, non-technical skills are the key, right? If you have technical skills, that's awesome, and that's really valuable. But I can get anyone training on technical skills. So if I need you to know SolidWorks, I can get you that training that exists. But I can't get you training on non-technical skills.
So almost like soft versus hard skill?
Software, any mechanical skills, anything like that, I can get you training on. I can train anybody to change a tire, to do SolidWorks, I can train anybody to do that. It takes varying amounts of time based on what it is, but all of that you can train into. I can't train you to be motivated. I can't train you to be trustworthy. I can't train you to keep at it when things get tough, right? So those personality traits, those skills, I can't train into you. That's what I look for in people, right? I can trust you, you're motivated, and you keep going when things get really hard. And in startups, things get really hard, so you need that. That's what I would look for in someone before any technical skill that they would have.
So actually going off that, my manager at Simmons, because I was asking him about the hiring process and how he likes to do it, and he says that most of the questions he asks are non-technical related questions. He asks very few.
Yeah, like I wrote down a
questions.
few on mine that aren't technical.
Yeah, because he says that it's much easier to train people in technical questions and basically impossible for anything non-technical. So he asks questions targeted towards certain things that he wants as a manager from his employees.
Yeah, because like the questions that I had written down were definitely more or less like not necessarily architectural based, but more or less like questions I do ask during architecture interviews, which are like sort of neutral to all occupations. And like some of those were like experience and a good resume. Do they seem dedicated? What can they offer? And do they seem as like a good fit for what the company needs to get?
Right, and where are your technical skills in those questions? I mean, they're not there, and that's what it comes down to. It's like, right, if I can get you training on something, that's not what's going to stand out to me. So if you come up to me and say, well, I know this software, and I know this, and I know this, that's great. But are you motivated? Can I trust you? Do you get excited about the work we're doing,
I feel like the key question, at least that like I had written down, was definitely do they seem like a good fit? Because I feel like what your major point was with like technical versus soft skill. I feel like if there's not good soft skills with like that they have to offer, it's not gonna work well.
And going off that, obviously we've been talking about like managers and how they want out of an employee, but let's say you were the employee, a prosperous potential employee, interviewing for a startup. Let's just say they focus on green energy, okay? And you were asked, what can you do for the company? How would you respond, Joe?
This is a wonderful question. This is a how do you sell yourself to people question. Going back to presentations, like what's your personal pitch, right? This is a really, really great question, especially for anybody who's looking to start the interview process or who's in the interview process. First thing I would do is find out why the startup is hiring people. What are they looking for, right? Which is easier said, is easier done, right? Because than said, or it's easy, right? You go on LinkedIn or whatever, site you're looking for jobs or, and you can read the description of what they're looking for. But I would read it carefully to try and build the profile of the person that they're looking for. And when you go and interview, you want to be that person, right? You want to be what they're looking for. This gets really interesting if you have interviews for a company, multiple interviews, and you talk to different people. I have gone through interviews before where, right, they end with, do you have any questions? And I ask this person because I know there's more interviews in this process. I ask them, what would you describe as the ideal candidate for this position? And then they tell me, and I say, great, thanks. So we're looking for someone who's A, B, C. And then I get to the second round of interviewing. And the person starts with, so tell me about yourself. And I say, well, I am ABC. If it's true, you never want to lie in an interview. If you're not ABC, you don't want to lie. But if you're like, yeah, I'm ABC, lay it out exactly how the person just gave it to you in the last interview, and you'll see the facial expression on the person go, oh wow, like I'm impressed. Like that's exactly what we're looking for. Yes, because you just took it from the last person you interviewed with. So there's a little tactic, but that's what I would do, right? Understanding what the company wants and who they're looking for, what skills they're looking for, what kind of, again, like we talked about motivations, personalities, like what are they looking for? And then if you fit that and you believe you fit that, be that in your interview.
Okay. So Joe.
So Nick.
As you've had personal experience in startups, when joining a startup, do you think it's more important to get the knowledge on how to be a good entrepreneur and entrepreneurship, or keep those bonds with people who are passionate about the same topics as you for later in life?
I think what is important when joining a startup, and if there's a few things you can take away from joining a startup, is the first one is developing your approach to problem solving. Right, what's super cool about working for a startup versus a big company is you really get more involved in the way you approach problems and think about problems. And I think developing that skill, being able to, look at a problem, try something, pivot if it doesn't work, try something again, get feedback, does it work, pivot again, right? That's actually really hard to do in a big corporation because, you're trying a bunch of things and everything, but you're kind of working in your little tiny micro department here and you're not quite sure how it's affecting other things on the broader sense. But when you're in a startup, you've got a 5-person team and everything you do has a huge impact just as much as like the founder of the company. And it's what it is. So I think walking away with that is excellent. And then, as what you're saying, those connections and stuff you make, that's another one, right? People understand that sometimes things just don't work out. Maybe it's not an exciting topic for you. Maybe the track that the startup's going in, you don't really want to follow. That's fine. So building your network of fellow entrepreneurs, fellow innovators is incredibly valuable to your future career and honestly, your future happiness, right? When you want to switch jobs, get into another industry, or just try something different. It makes a world of a difference. Get that LinkedIn going.
So actually, based on the LinkedIn real quick, I was told that one of the key things I need to have on my LinkedIn profile is, you know how LinkedIn let you do those skill tests and give you the small badge that says you took the test and you can do that skill like Java, JavaScript, whatever?
Yeah, which one do you think you're most good at or whatever, and have people respond to it?
Yeah, I was told that those badges are very important when potential employees look at your LinkedIn profile.
Yeah, because I feel like some people sometimes don't have their resume added, so they can't necessarily see what your skills are. So I feel like when you have those things added to your profile, it also gives them the access to see what you're actually good at without actually having the resume available.
Do you have any opinion on this at all?
I think it's definitely interesting. I think, right, let's picture a LinkedIn profile. You put in the top of your profile, I'm good at Excel. Great. But then you take the skill test and you pass the course and you get the badge. So now you're the potential employer and you're looking down and they say, okay, well, they said they're good at Excel. oh, and here's a little badge that says they took this Excel skill test and they're at X level of experience with Excel. There's proof is what it is, right? It all comes down to validation, right? So I said I'm good at Excel, here's the validation, right? It's like having a license, right? Why do you hire a contractor, an electrician who has a license? Because they're legit, right? You have some benchmark that says, yes, they know what they're doing. They're probably not gonna wire it wrong. Mistakes happen, people make mistakes, but I have a license, right? As opposed to looking at another contractor, an electrician, and they don't have a license. Which one are you gonna hire to wire your house? Probably the one with the license. One, because I think you need one by law, but two, even if there wasn't a law, like you kind of want some benchmark that says, yes, we know what we're doing. Why are every single one of us getting college degrees, right? Or have a college degree? Because it's a benchmark. It's something we get to say, hi, I'm good at architecture. I'm good at computer science, right? I'm good at business management and entrepreneurship. Why? Here's my 4-year degree to prove it. That's what it is, right? So it's exactly like a college degree, right? So these LinkedIn things are just simply the proof that people are looking for to believe your claim. Another great thing are those like recommendations. People can write little things about you. Those are also huge. You know, you have someone who is well connected in the Boston area, let's say. So like the founder of ABC startup that a bunch of people know really well, and you go and give a presentation, you know, let's bring back the presentations. And the person says, wow, this person's a super good public speaker. People will then be scrolling down your LinkedIn. Oh, they say they're good at public speaking. There's no LinkedIn test on that, but hey, wow, this person, I know this person said they're really good. I bet they're really good then, right? Things like that go a long way. And it's all about right proof and validation to validate your claim about yourself. It was a long-winded answer.
Yeah.
Long story short, it's about validation.
Are we moving on?
Mm-hmm. We are moving on.
So, Joe,
So Nick,
we kind of combined these two questions that you see on the document. So, here's a new question for you. If your manager had come up to you and asked you to basically give a presentation on the company in front of an audience you didn't know, how would you do it?
well, I would hope beforehand I would already have a pitch developed. So if you are in a position where you're going to be asked to describe something, let's make you the founder of a startup. You are not going to get through your founder journey without someone saying, so what does your startup do? Tell me what you do. What does your company do? Right? You've got to have an answer. And if you don't have an answer prepared, one, you're not a good entrepreneur. I'm just going to come out and say it. You have to have what they call your elevator pitch, 1-minute pitch, whatever you want to call it. You've got to have your quick spiel. This is what we do, right? This is what we solve. This is how we do it. This is why we do it, right? If you don't have it prepared, you're already at a huge disadvantage. So to answer your question, one, I would already have it prepared. And so I would just use that. I would say, okay, manager, sounds good. Get up in front of the audience and say, hey, everyone, this is our startup, right? And tell that story, whatever the 60-second pitch is, not starting with, hi, my name is. And that's how I do it.
All right. So I have one more question to ask you. If you were to start a startup, what would you want to focus on? What would your work environment be like? And what would you have any daily, monthly, or yearly goals for that company?
Wow, talk about a loaded question. What would you like it to focus on? I think generally speaking, like, what would I like it to focus on? So what would I want us to be building, developing? I would want to be solving problems. Let's see, I would love to do something in like the environmental sector. You know, I'm big on that. I love green tech. I love green energy. I love sustainability. So I'd love to be on a startup that focuses on that. I also like things like safety and infrastructure, like city infrastructure, developing the cities of the future. That's all super cool to me. So I'd say that would be the focus. Work environment, great question. So I believe in a working environment that rewards hard work and celebrates learning moments, even if those moments come through failure.
So basically saying failure is okay.
Failure is okay. And I think it's really important to remember that. And I think also for anybody in undergrad, in high school, in grade school, in, master's degrees, even in PhDs, you're in academia, right? The point of academia is to mess up and learn and grow from it, right? No one's, losing their job, right? If a CEO messes up, half their company might get laid off, right?
Yeah.
They can't afford to mess up like that. But in academia, it happens, you take a test and you fail. And I know it seems like life and death in the moment. Trust me, I've been there.
Yeah, I feel like... Sorry to interrupt you.
No problem. But the last thing I'd say is just, but academia is supposed to be a learning environment. I think that's a great mentality to take into the working environment, as long as, right, failure and, misplacing all the company funds, like in It's a Wonderful Life, that 1940s movie. I hope all of you have watched it. It's very cute. That's okay.
I have.
Losing all the company's money is really bad. That's a bad failure. But trying a marketing tactic and it doesn't work, but you learn from it, great, okay, and then you try another one.
Like, having experience, especially like as you mentioned with architecture, I feel like architecture is just one of those majors where it's actually based off of needing failure to actually succeed.
Right, you need it. And that's the last thing about the work environment is, and it relates right to exactly what we're talking about. I would want a startup that not only is developing products and solutions and solving a problem, but also developing people. So I would want the people I'm working with, and let's just say I'm the founder and CEO, the people working with me and under me, I would want them to be developing and growing as people, as well as having a successful company that's producing products that are solving problems without contributing to global waste.
Okay.
Yeah.
So do you
Also-
continue?
Also, like, keeping on your topic of like green energy, I feel like also it's kind of important to like also have a company that sort of focuses on not necessarily like two topics, but a topic combined that covers two things. Because I feel like especially today with like factories and all that stuff that are producing all this carbon dioxide that are causing this global change, I feel like having something that's like green architecture or something like that is sort of important as well, because then you're sort of covering two things for one major.
Yeah, call me an extremist, but I think all corporations should take a Hippocratic oath, right? Your goal should not be to do any harm. And if you have sweatshops and you have major pollution, I don't think you're a great corporation. And we should encourage corporations and corporate leaders to take an oath like that, right? We're going to try not to do harm. I get it. Waste is going to happen, pollution is going to happen. We don't have the technology implemented to reduce it to nothing, but man, if you can do what you can to not do harm, that would be awesome. And I think that would be key in any startup I create. It's just don't do that.
Fair. Alrighty. Well, that is going to be the end of this section. After this break, we are going to be talking about both Nick's and Joe's personal experiences.
Oh boy.
And it is going to be a really good time. So see you after this break. Hello and welcome back. We are going to be talking about our own personal experiences. Mostly Nick's and Joe's, because I don't have any experience with this. But we're going to be starting with Nick. So, Nick, in your past experiences, how hard was it to decide what your company topic and the product that would be sold?
So for me, Omar, it wasn't necessarily extremely hard. It was the harder part about mine was sort of picking a more specific topic in the topic that I wanted to do. So with mine, it was focusing on recycle. I don't necessarily know if it was recycled or upcycling it, but I reused old glass yogurt jars and reused candle wax to create aromatherapy candles, and basically reuse the wax that people would throw out after like a candle gets down to like, I don't know, say like 2 or 3 centimeters low, because you're just basically wasting energy when you do that.
Joe, for you as well, the same question. Do you need me to repeat it?
No, I think I got it, Omar. It's honestly, I find it extraordinarily difficult. Like, I love basing startup projects, or even I'll call them like small ventures, like write a little soap project, or whatever you have. Picking the topic, it's so hard because I want to pick something that interests me and gets me excited, but also, especially if it's a startup and I want something that will grow and develop, I want it to be a problem that I can solve, that I'm passionate about, and want to see the impact in the world.
Alrighty. So, Nick, this is going back to you. This next question: what made you decide to focus on a specific product? Was it because it was easy to produce, or was a topic you were passionate about, a topic that you knew more people needed to look into because it can hurt in the long run?
So for me, Omar, it was more or less because I had an interest in, like, basically creating candles and, like, other stuff like that. Because I've known friends who've had families, and even my own family sometimes will sort of throw away candles when they're not fully empty, and at that point it's really just wasting like energy, and especially per se, like if you don't have like a wired house and you get like a power outage, like what are you gonna do then when you throw away a candle that's no longer there? It's like, so it was more or less an interest of mine to do it. And yeah, that's just about it, really.
And then Joe,
Yeah,
question for you.
I think for me it's interest as well. So picking a topic you're interested in, you're much more likely to stick with it in the long run and be happy, right? If you were forming a startup, let's say, in healthcare innovations, and you're not excited about healthcare, you don't get excited about healthcare, but you really get excited about candles, you're not going to stick with it, and it's just not going to be fun. So I'd say, when picking a topic, the biggest thing for me is deciding what I'm interested, finding what gets me excited, and that is the topic I would go with.
Yeah, for me it was kind of more or less to like the health aspect of like the aromatherapy and just like all like the newer stuff that was coming out about it. So it was more basically, I guess, like the health aspect of it.
Alrighty. So, the next question is, I know most of you, or actually both of you, focused on recycling/upcycling aspects. Okay? So, what got you interested in doing so?
For me, it was really more or less just like the... For me, it was more or less just the fact that it was learning how... like the statistics of how much actually gets recycled versus how much doesn't. So really it was more focused in on the fact that like I was trying to focus more in just like sort of lowering the numbers that don't actually get recycled in a sense.
Yeah, when my team and I were launching Ridgeway Technologies, is the startup we were working on. I'll give a quick summary of it. We were kind of focusing on the waste recovery in industrial processes. All right, industrial processes, for those of you who don't know, are anything from a coal-fired power plant to incinerators that are burning confidential material to anything that is your HVAC systems even, right? So those systems fire off a lot of waste heat, right? They take energy, they heat the system, and then it just dissipates into the atmosphere, which is huge and contributes greatly to global warming. So our startup was focusing on that and how to recover that waste heat and convert it into electricity. So we had some prototypes built that actually lit up some LEDs. It was pretty cool. But what we focused on in Ridgeway Technologies, right, was the interest in renewables, sustainability, and environmentalism as a whole. And actually, it's funny, I actually applied and got into several environmental engineering and environmental policy programs when I was first getting into undergrad, so at the end of my high school career, all around the East Coast. And I was really deciding that I was going to be an environmentalist, whether that be like an environmental engineer or a policymaker, or out in the field collecting the data for these studies and everything. But at the last minute, I decided to go down the business route, but I never kind of lost that interest in sustainability and environmentalism.
Awesome. And Joe, as you know, we were talking about Nick's aromatherapy candles and how they were recycled and from yogurt jar, from glass jars, from yogurt and stuff. And although Nick's short-term company focuses on recycling, do you think the end goal is actually recycled energy / saved or newly created energy?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, Omar, we're getting at the same goal, right? Recovering waste is a huge part of the sustainability world. So they call it going for the idea of zero waste, which is, at the end of the day, when all your processes are done and everything, you have nothing that you're contributing either to the atmosphere or to a landfill, right? So zero waste is the goal. And I think ultimately Nick and I were kind of going for the same thing. So he said, I've got these candles and there's wax and maybe a little wick still left in it, but they're getting tossed. And I said, hey, I've got an industrial process that's firing off a bunch of excess heat, right? We put energy from solar panels, from coal, from whatever it is, into the system, and now it's leaving the system as heat that we're not using. So both of us are trying to take advantage of the waste, reduce it by putting it into something else that people are going to use.
All right. And of course, Joe, everyone knows the phrase, it takes a million bad ideas for one good idea. In your experience, do you see this to be true?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I have a notebook at home, and I have text documents on my computer, and I have little sticky notes, and I have, through every academic notebook I had through college, these little light bulbs drawn in the margins, and then a paragraph next to it. Every single one of those represents an idea I've had, right? And I flipped back through them, and some of them were so cool in the moment, and I thought I was so smart. I was the next Bill Gates or Mark Zuckerberg, and then I read them again, and I'm like, oh, that's terrible. What? I don't even know what I was thinking, or someone else had already done it before, and it didn't work, and there was because it just was a terrible idea. Yes, right. I think Thomas Edison famously is in the same boat where, it takes so many tries to come up with something. And I think that it's as long as you have that creativity and you keep kind of pushing yourselves to think, that's critical, right? So that's why it takes like 1,000, 1,000,000 really bad ideas to come up with one, because you got to go through that process to think and then try and expand on the idea and then realize, oh, there's no revenue model. Never mind, just kidding. We're not going to do that. And then come up with another one and be like, actually, there's no market for that. And then come up with another one and be like, oh, that doesn't solve the problem at all, right? And eventually you get to one you say, oh, I've got a revenue model. Oh, I've got a market. Oh, it solves the problem. Wait, you've done it, right? Take that one and run with it.
Alrighty. And obviously you mentioned you have many, many, many ideas that you have. Has there been any idea that you really wanted to work on, but you just couldn't get it? Like it just couldn't work?
Yeah, unfortunately, Ridgeway Technologies never ended up working out for the team and I. So it was really cool, and we did have a solution, and we had, like I said, prototypes that would take heat, right, a heat differential, right, heat coming off of an industrial process combined with the outside air temperature, and convert that waste heat into electricity, and it worked. But the problem is we just didn't have the capability, the knowledge, or like really the know-how to take it and implement it and actually scale it. It was very difficult, and it was going to be extremely cost prohibitive as well, right? You're trying to take a new appliance, let's say, and stuff it into existing infrastructure is very hard. And this one would be super internal, right, where these processes are taking place. So it went way beyond us, and I really wish it had worked, but at the end of the day, we just couldn't make it happen.
So, with ideas that couldn't happen, are there any ideas that you would like to go back to and maybe try a different approach or try a different hand?
For me, not necessarily, because really the only business that I've ever really sort of been in starting phases and not really actually specifically made it a specific startup was the candles, and I haven't really thought of any other ideas that I wanted to really try. But
how about you, Joe?
Yeah, that's fair. You try something, you learn it, and you move on. Sometimes not going back to it is perfectly fine. Honestly, as a class project for my entrepreneurship class here at Wentworth, myself and 3 other people, classmates, developed a soap business. And honestly, I think we netted out like $300 positive with that. It was ridiculous. So at the end of the day, sometimes I think maybe I should just start selling soap for a living again, because it worked. It was all natural, vegan, organic soap. Like it was pretty cool. Like nice little bars.
You gave me one. It was actually nice.
A bunch of people at Wentworth had them and everything. So some days I think I should just go back and be a soap seller, a soap dealer, as they called me.
Yeah, Joe's soap. Yeah, it was great.
Yeah,
Simple soap. It was a good name too.
With the final product, profits, I should say, For mine, it was somewhere in like the lower 200s or whatever. So like, if same with like going off of Joe's point, like sometimes it is okay not to go back, but at the same time, it actually may be somewhat beneficial because then like you can regain all like. I feel like if you go back to like sort of past history, you sort of get those skills back too when you were trying to sell a product if you hadn't done it in a while.
Alrighty. Yeah. Now that is, like obviously you were selling soap. That's a pretty good idea. It worked out well. Same with your candle, it worked out well. And we did briefly cover this a bit about how you can tell a good idea from a bad one. A million bad ideas for one good one, but how can you tell the difference between a good idea from a bad idea?
It's the $1 million question, right? How can I tell what's a good idea? How can I tell what's a good company? It's the question everyone's always asking themselves. What I do is there's no yellow brick road, there's no magic rainbow, so you never know for 100% certainty. But I often encourage people to run down the checklist of what I call the checklist of a good idea. Right, what are the decent qualities that you can usually rely on to be like, this is a good idea? And the first one is, does it solve a problem? And I've mentioned this before in this podcast is, if it doesn't solve a problem, then it's probably not going to be something people will actually need. And you're relying on them wanting it, right? So, and sure, things change, right? At the first introduction of cars, did we need them? Not necessarily. Our world wasn't built for them. But now it's almost becomes a necessity, right? If you're not in an area that has reliable public transportation, you pretty much need a car to get around. So something like that, right? Does it solve a problem? And in that sense, it would have been transportation, right? Getting from one place to another. The second one I would say is there a revenue model, right? Are people actually going to pay for it? Because whatever it is, no matter how cool you think it is or how cool anybody else thinks it is, if no one is going to pay for it, you're not going to have a startup. Right? You need a revenue model. You need people to part with their cash, to hand you that cash for you to hand them the product. And if that's not going to happen, forget it, right? It's not going to happen because you're not going to have a revenue model. You won't be able to support the business. And again, this goes for nonprofits too. Nonprofits need money, right? Nonprofits need money. It's not like they just don't deal with money. So like, even if you're doing something that's not necessarily for profit, still got to have some way for people to part with their cash and continue your operations. And then the last thing I usually put is, does it make the world better than it was? I know it sounds kind of altruistic, but really, like, if you're just going to have this thing that kind of trashes the world, well, maybe it's not a great idea, right? Maybe it's not something you want to bring into existence because you can see a world in which it's making things worse.
Yeah. All right. Has there been any ideas that you had that did make the world a better place, but there wasn't a need for it at all? Like, zero need?
Off the top of my head, I can't think of one. I can think of a close example, which is it solved a problem for me, but I don't think people would pay for it, and I don't really think there was like a more universal need for it. So I once wanted to make this application I could put on my phone because I was networking with a bunch of people, and I was trying to remember specific things about them. So I wanted to tag them, right? Almost like imagine a database. I want to tag, I meet Omar and he knows C++ and Java and he goes to Wentworth. So I would want to tag you with C++, Wentworth, Java, radio show host, things like that. Turns out you can just use the notes section of many contact apps that are already in your phone and you can search those. So no one was going to buy it from me or get it from me. But I thought it solved a big problem for me and I liked the idea, but I never did it because, there was no market for it.
We've been talking about startups for a good portion of this radio show. So in today's world, do you think there is specific topics that are important to focus when you are launching a startup company?
I'd say probably, as I mentioned before with today's world, probably more or less the green energy and recycling companies, because that's probably what's most needed right now. Yes, I feel like other companies are needed, but not really as important.
Yeah, I hear you, Nick, and I'm really in the same boat. So I believe clean energy, clean water, food production without a major detrimental environmental impact, and security are like the four things I would be looking at, right? We got to make sure our energy's clean and not hurting the world. Got to make sure we're getting clean water to people. We got to make sure we're producing enough food for people, but in a way that doesn't hurt the environment. And we've got to make sure people feel safe. I think, like, talk about the hierarchy of needs. If you can check off some of those bottom ones, I think that's what progresses our society forward, and that's what I'd love to see people bringing innovation to right now.
All right. So I don't have any more questions. Do you have any more questions, man? No? Well, that is going to be wrapping up the show here. I know Joe wants to do a shout out real quick.
Yeah, Omar, thank you so much, and Nick, you as well, for having me on the show. This was excellent. I would love to give a quick shout out to my mom on her birthday. So happy birthday, Mom. Thanks for being the best mom ever. And again, thank you both for inviting me here today.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you for taking time out of your Sunday to come here and talk with us and let us develop as people.
No, always a pleasure.